Hey leaders, it's Rick Miller, your tiny habits and balance over speed coach, and welcome to the second law of the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, the law of influence. This is one of John Maxwell's favorite one because as you'll figure out, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. When it comes to influence, we often think of Abraham Lincoln as probably one of the greatest influencers of our American history. But let me tell you a little story about Abraham. In the 30 years before he was president, he organized a militia to start fighting in the Black Hawk War. And in those days, if you organized a group, you were naturally given the title of leader. So he was organized his militia and he was the first captain. Sounds good, but one problem. He knew nothing about leading people nor anything about military language or operations. So he proceeded to just continually make errors to the point where he went from captain, where he had all the influence, to where it actually decreased and he ended up as a private at the end of that war. Luckily for us and for the nation, he didn't quit there and he continued to work on his influence to the point where he was the right man at the right time to lead a number of generals to finally win the war between the states. And he was a fine leader. But just goes to show that when it comes to leadership, sometimes where you start, it's certainly not where you end up, and it can neither be awarded, appointed, or assigned. When it comes to influence and leadership, there are a lot of myths out there that people just naturally assume. Let's go through those. First one's the management myth. And management is focused on organizing and controlling an organization, but leadership is all about creating a vision and giving people a reason to be motivated to move forward. Big difference. The entrepreneur myth, of course, is that entrepreneurs are people who can look at an opportunity and assess the risk and figure out how to exploit the opportunity and make a profit. Doing that doesn't necessarily make you great with leading people. And therefore, you have plenty of organizations where the entrepreneur is not the person who's really leading the organization. The knowledge myth, just think of a university. We know plenty of professors who are brilliant, but would you follow them? How about the pioneer myth? Oftentimes we think that who's ever the first to do something is clearly the leader. How about the fact that Edmund Hillary is recognized as the person who was the first to reach the top of Mount Everest, but he wasn't the leader. The leader of the group was actually a person named John Hunt, who to this day, if I had mentioned him, I doubt you'd know who he was. And the last one, of course, is the position myth. Oftentimes, people think that it's the title that'll make things happen. Well, Apple got rid of Steve Jobs and brought in the president of PepsiCo to run Apple, and he ran it in the ground. They had to bring Jobs back in to salvage Apple because it's not the position that makes the leader, it's the leader who makes the position. Okay, time to test out your own effectiveness on the law of influence. Here are 7 characteristics that oftentimes people use to influence others. What I want you to do is on that scale of 1 to 10, rate which ones of these you use all the time, which would be a 10, or I rarely use it, which would be a 1. Things like character, relationship, intuition, knowledge, and of course, your past success and what you can do. These are all great tests. One thing I've found too is if you really want to double check your rating of yourself, join a volunteer organization because it's the best testing ground for you to find out how good you are at influencing others. Okay, it's feedback time where you get to find out how you're doing really on the law of influence. Here's your assignment. I want you to think about something that you would like to try to influence with the following people on this screen between if you have a boss, if you have a subordinate, one of your family members, maybe a friend or a colleague. But I want you to have a meeting with them or take them to lunch and attempt to influence them around the area you're interested in. Then here's the most fun part. I want you to rate whether or not you were successful or whether or not you weren't. And most importantly, why. Put that in your online portal or your workbook, and it'll give you a great way to evaluate how you're doing on the law of influence and give you something to benchmark against going forward. So that's it for this one. Remember, it's always too early to quit, and it's never too late to start growing. See you at the next one.